And thank you very much for the warm introduction, President Robertson. I lost her wherever she went. And Sheriff Tompkins, who are here. What I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about what's happened to working families. And now most of you know I am the senator from Massachusetts. Woohoo! And during the financial crisis, I was there trying to get some accountability over the banks with the Troubled Asset Relief Program. And then I was there to try to set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And before that, I was a professor for a long time. But this hasn't always, growing up was very, very different from this. My parents worked really hard. My dad sold carpeting, he sold fencing. He ended up as a maintenance man. My mom raised 4 kids. Those are my 3 brothers, and I'm the cool one in sunglasses. Either you're born with style or you're not. My daddy was taking this picture, but with our place by our fingernails. And things got pretty bad when I was in junior high. My military, my daddy had a heart attack, and the medical bills piled up, and we lost our car, and we came so close to losing our house that it felt like you could feel the foundation shake. We were flat out of options when my mom, who was 50 years old, took her first job. She's the tall one in the plaid dress there. She went to work at Sears, answering the phones. It was a minimum wage job, so she could make the mortgage payments and keep food on the table. And that minimum wage job saved our home and saved our family. But it was really, really hard, and we came really, really close to complete disaster. And for a lot of families today, this story does not end well. For a lot of families, no matter how hard they work, no matter how many coupons they cut, no matter how much they try to save, there is just never enough to make ends meet. And for some families, particularly African-American families, Latino families, the system has been rigged for decades so that there never will be enough to make ends meet. And none of this gets better unless we make some fundamental changes in this country. And that's what tonight is about. We all know that America is the great economic engine of the world. There have been some little ups and downs, but for decades, the productivity and innovation of American workers and American businesses has kept our GDP on an upward climb, bringing record profits. The stock market is booming. Inflation is low. Unemployment has dropped below 5%. All of the official markers of a healthy rate. But who exactly is doing great? Yeah, so this is back in the early 1970s. I just want to give you a picture of what families look like. Families were doing well enough that they were putting away almost 12% of their disposable income in savings. And revolving debt, that, like credit card debt, was about 1/2 of 1%. That's the little orange slice you see off to the edge here. In other words, families had some money in the bank, they had not much debt, and that's what we meant by a solid middle have reversed. Yeah, on average, savings have been cut by 2/3, and debt has exploded. Today's families care more than families did just a generation ago. So we've got less savings, more debt, families who are living on the edge of now. 1 in 3 Americans today who has a credit file is dealing with a debt collector, bills that aren't paid. 18-year-olds are taking on these filed for bankruptcy. That is a little less than all of the households in Boston and Seattle and Cleveland and Atlanta combined. And it's happening every single year. The American economy may look great from the outside, but for most of the families living in it, this economy looks very different. So the question is, how did this happen? Why did families pick up so much debt? How did they get squeezed so hard? Well, the easy explanation: fancy cars, new iPhones, eating out too much. Most people assume that America's debt problems come from wasteful spending. But here's the thing, it is just not true. In fact, over the years or so, families have actually cut a lot of their spending. So a day is spending less on food, and that includes eating out. So it's all of it. Right? It's less on furniture than they did at young families today. The data show that most families are not frittering away their money. So what happened? Well, they've watched their nickels, but boy, have they been slammed by the expenses are staggering. Families today spend 57% more on 104% more on health insurance. College, even in a state school, is through the roof. A kid today in a four-year college will pay tuition and fees that's nearly 3 times higher than in the 1970s. And with more parents of small children headed off to work long hours, the cost of child care,
Wow.
look at that.
I know that.
So these changes mean that families today face a lot more risk. Think about it this way. When my parents needed more money for something like car repair, they cut back on everyday items to be able to get by. And then when my daddy got sick, my mother could go out to work to pay the bills. Yeah, it was a minimum wage job, but it was all new money to the family, nothing that had already been put into the budget. Today's families just don't have that flexibility. They can't cut back on their health insurance or their child care costs. Lots of families have only one parent today, and even most two-parent families already have everyone working. So when something goes wrong, when someone gets sick or when work hours get cut, they don't have a way to bring in another paycheck. So what happens? When families get in trouble, when something goes wrong or they get hit with extra expenses, they either take on a lot more credit card debt or they go belly up on their mortgages. The real question is, what generation that we could end up with this difference? What changed? Policy. We changed our policies. We went from a country, you recognize that guy. We changed our policies. We went from a country that strengthened its middle class, its working families, to one that bet on its wealthiest citizens and then hoped that the benefits would. So here's the story that I want to talk about. From the 1790s to the 1930s, we were a boom and bust economy. These are the busts that you see. Things would go well, the economy would grow for a number of years, and then inevitably, another recession or another depression would hit, and American families would struggle with lost jobs and lost homes. But when the Great Depression hit in 1929, we pulled up our socks and we said, we can do better. We passed laws following 1929. No more crashes for nearly 80 years. We also used that time period to build real opportunities in this country. First, we decided to regulate the big banks. That's Glass and Steagall standing up there. We created to make sure that these crises. Before 1980, we made a real effort through our government to invest in this country's future. We spent money on education, on research, areas that benefited a large portion of our population. And all of us together through. And here's the deal. It worked. So what this is about is this is 1935 to 1980. The right part, the baseball caps, which I just happen to pick as a particular team, that's 90% of America. This is the top 10%. So this is everybody outside the top 10%, and here's the top 10%. The 90% got 70% of all the new income that was generated. Not perfect, but pretty darn good. This was in America where people could afford to work and have a family. It was in America where I got to go to college for $50 a semester. Yeah, it was in America where my mother to support a family on a minimum wage job. And that just couldn't happen today. You can't pay a mortgage on a minimum wage job. Today, a minimum wage job won't pay the bills for a mama and a baby in a one-room apartment. They're very different from what it was in my parents' era. Some very deliberate policy decisions made by our government. The decision to invest in the richest Americans. Part one of trickle down, I want to talk about here. It was to rewrite the tax laws. Politicians in Washington decided that the wealthy and tax loopholes were created that made it easier for multinationals to go overseas. Giant corporations could stash their money in foreign countries and let small businesses here at home be the ones who carried the full freight. With all of these loopholes in place, I'll just went from paying about 30% of all tax revenue that came in to paying a little less than 10% of all the money. And what Republicans to say, I'm sorry, there's no money for education or for research. And if we're going to be honest, it wasn't just Republicans. There were a lot of Democrats who said it too. And the result is just exactly what you would expect. We aren't making the investments in the things we really need. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Yes, that is the Mississippi River Bridge in Minnesota that fell down. Overall, from the American Society of Civil Engineers. And as a proportion of our GDP, our spending on research and development is now down more than a third from where it was in the 1960s and 70s. And what about education? That great ticket to the middle class. Well, let's face it, Head Start and public education, preschools and expensive colleges. Making sure that all of our kids get a good education, including African American kids and non-English speaking kids and special Same is true for higher ed, where the costs of an education are going up, but government support at state schools is down. Surprised that student loan debt is exploding. The second big trickle-down change was to fire the cops. Not the cops on Main Street, where a lot of powerful corporations could do exactly what they wanted to do and no one would stop them. Vesting, Glass-Steagall were repealed. The SEC was neutered. Antitrust enforcement shrunk. Giant businesses expanded and small businesses got crowded out. Without a cop on the beat, Wall Street got even more greedy and based on cheating people on mortgages, on credit cards, on payday loans. They loaded up on risks and they put the whole economy in danger. And we all know how this turned out, because in 2008 was the greatest economic depression since the Great Depression. All these changes were really bad for hardworking families, but there was one more that truly cemented the problems. The system itself was corrupted to serve the wealthy and the powerful. Today, most politicians, they are working for people and corporations who have big money to spend. Billions of dollars flow into the campaign coffers of American politicians to tilt them in favor of continuing their support for the wealthy. And it's not just campaign contributions, it is so much more. The number I picked here is to look at lobbying. No one has exact numbers for the early 1980s, but it's estimated that politically active organizations spent about $200 million. That is a lot of money. But by 2002, that number had skyrocketed to $1.8 billion. And by 2012, it had reached a shocking number of $3.3 billion. Adjusted for inflation, that is 7 times more money than they spent 30 years ago. And about 3/4 of it benefits no one but giant corporations. CEOs have figured out that spending millions of dollars lobbying Washington can result in billions of dollars of increased profits for these corporations. And are only the tip of the iceberg. Business executives and government officials spin through a revolving door, making sure that the interests of powerful corporations are always carefully protected. Giant Wall Street businesses offer millions of dollars to high-ranking executives to go work in Washington for a few years, making policies to benefit exactly the same Wall Street businesses that sent them there. And corporations, study after study, that just so happen to turn out to support the special rule. And that's why, despite tons of evidence showing how bad these policies have been for working families, that nothing changes. Remember the number that showed that from 1935 to 1980, as total income, remember GDP was going up across the country, that as total income went up, that the 70% of all the new income generated, that was 1935 to 1980. Well, those days are gone. From 1980 to right on growing. Remember that first GDP slide. But now it is divided very differently. Since 1980, the share of new income that went to the 90% was almost zero. Nothing. It does not even add up to 1%. If you look at market income, income that individuals earn before taxes and government transfers like Social Security, the top 10% is since 1980. And for African Americans, trickle down was the black-white wealth gap has been there for as the wealth gap between black families and white families tripled. The economy is growing. Remember how GDP just keeps going up. Our country is getting richer, but the economy is really growing only for those at the top. Everyone else is being left behind. And here's one more piece to the puzzle, also starting in 1935. The green line shows how union membership from 1935 forward grows, how income inequality falls. Membership is up, income inequality goes down, and the reverse is also true. Unions help make sure that this economy and this government work. And here is what makes this story really scary. Address other problems, some of the biggest problems that we're facing. Look, the world is heating up, and climate change could destroy us in Washington. There won't be any changes. Trade deals force U.S. workers to compete child labor in Guatemala and Jordan. But so long as multinational corporations call the shots in our trade negotiations, that won't change either. And a tech boom is leaving millions of people scrambling to put together enough work to support themselves. But so long as Washington lobbyists keep the Labor Department at bay, people will work harder and harder and have less problems, really big problems. But the biggest problem we face is political. Yes, that is David Koch, one half of the Koch brothers. They are dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the elections of 2016. And thanks to guys like him, deliberate government policies that won in favor of privileged class, billionaires, and great way to spend an afternoon, wasn't it? Has been taken over by the rich and powerful, then the rest of us can take it back. Right. And we can make it once again serve American families and our children. We need to be making regulations for everyone. You know, let me just say this. A kid who gets caught with a few ounces of drugs faces jail time. But a CEO of a giant bank preschool to college to build opportunities for our kids. That's what we need to do. We need to investing in clean energy infrastructure to create new technology, new jobs, a healthier planet. We need to be doing that. We need to research because curing cancer all we need a government that works for us. Now look, Republicans make government the brunt. Things wrong sometimes. But there is a difference between a government that is trying to do its best and needs some help to get it right, and a government that is just plain working for someone else. Look at it this way. A weak government can't police Wall Street and students. A torn government can't move decisively against climate change. A captured government can't negotiate a better trade deal. Without government, we don't build a stronger nation. And without government, we need a government that works for all of us. That's